If there's one thing that I promise Locked On Commanders, the Locked On Commanders audience, it is that I'm going to be honest in every episode. This episode really tested that. Our first question in this mailbag episode, ranking the NFC East draft classes right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday. Your friend, your eyes, your ears on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders, doing that for WUSA9.com, also doing it for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode. It is a mailbag episode, so we're going to answer questions from you, Commanders fans, specifically our insiders, including some new insiders. We got a couple of new insiders here asking their first questions as insiders, so very excited for that. We also got a brand new insider shortly before we've recorded this episode, so continuing to add insiders through the offseason. Couldn't be happier to be welcoming those of you who are new to that program. Also want to welcome our everydayers, the special Locked On Commanders members of the audience that come through for every single episode, whether you're doing it live, whether you're doing it day of, or you're catching up after vacation or work or whatever it is. I want to give a special appreciation to all of you, for everybody out there. If you're not already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this episode right now, please take the time to do so. If you're new to the show, I want to appreciate you for coming through for today's episode. Hopefully you like what you hear, what you see, and you come back through. Locked On Commanders is a daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So make sure you come back again soon. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Kicking off this mailbag episode with a doozy, and it's going to take up a good part of this mailbag episode. In fact, actually, we've got so many questions, but this one's going to take up such a good chunk of today's episode that we're probably going to do another mailbag tomorrow. We'll see how the news cycle is working and if there's other things that we need to talk about. But got a lot of good questions that I really want to get to as quickly as possible because they are post-draft questions. And of course, we got rookie mini camp coming up in just over a week. So we're going to start off here with Cam, who says, back to who moved the needle the most in the NFC East, including the Commanders, but you have to be unbiased. Giants are scarier pending Jackson Dart. Cam, I am always unbiased. We all have our biases, right? But my coverage is unbiased. I make sure I remove any bias that I can possibly have into it. So looking at just 2025, as much as it pains me to say this, the Dallas Cowboys had the best draft class in the NFC East this year, followed by the Commanders and the Giants, and then lastly, the Eagles. But look, there's some context to this, right? And I think that we also need to understand that the more your team needs, the more holes your team has, the more you project your draft picks to have major roles, potentially be starters. And the more you do that, the better your draft class looks, right? Like that's kind of how this works at this phase of the operation. It's not until you get a few years down the road where you can kind of really nail down how good was that draft class, because now you've had time to integrate them, mold them into your scheme, see their performance, see their development, all that stuff. Right now, all we're looking at is how impactful do we expect this draft class to be? And when we break it down by numbers, because that's how I do things here, turns out the Dallas Cowboys win that math equation. So let's break this down. Looking at just 2025. Remember, this is the 2025 NFL draft class as it stands, April 30th, May 1st, end of April, early May, right? So that's the scope that we're looking at when we're talking about these draft classes. When we look at the Dallas Cowboys, they had two first-round talents come into their organization through the weekend's selections. Offensive guard Tyler Booker, who they took in the first round, and then edge rusher Dominic Araku, who had first-round grades from a lot of people, but slipped into the second round. It happens every year. They have four players that you can say are probably going to be significant contributors: Booker, Ezaraku, cornerback Siobhan Ravel, and running back Jaden Blue. The deepest significant contributor projected in their draft class, fifth rounder Jaden Blue, running back out of Texas. So that's a pretty strong, when you're getting significant contributors in the fifth round, that's a pretty strong draft class, right? Looking at the Philadelphia Eagles now, one first-round talent, linebacker Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. They have two or three potential special or significant contributors this year. None of their draft picks are projected starters. So again, we kind of go back to this. where do you need players to fill in? That kind of is going to help dictate how good, quote unquote, your draft class looks. None of the Eagles draft picks this year are projected starters, even their first rounder, linebacker Jahad Campbell. But Campbell, potentially defensive end Ty Robinson, they might get into the rotation so they could have an impact there. Safety Andrew Makuba, I think, has an outside shot to jump safety Reed Blankenship into the rotation. So 2 or 3 potential significant contributors out of this year's draft class. The deepest one coming in the 4th round, that's defensive end Ty Robinson. You look down to the Giants, 2 first-round talents drafted by the New York Giants, both of them in the first round. Edge Abdul Carter out of Penn State, the number 3 overall pick, and then quarterback Jackson Dart, who they drafted after trading back in the first round. Now, full disclosure here, I'm not super high on Jackson Dart, okay, but there was a lot of talk about him going in the first round. Obviously, he was drafted in the first round, so at least the Giants had a first-round grade on him, right? So 2 first-round talents, right? That's how we're going to go. That's how you take the bias out of it, right, Cam? 3 significant contributors. Again, Carter, of course. Jackson Dart, not expected to be an immediate contributor this year, but we'll see how it turns out. I think defensive tackle Darius Alexander out of Toledo could potentially be a good rotational player. He's not going to replace Dexter Lawrence or anything like that, but certainly could make an impact for them. And then running back Cam Scatterbo. Pretty much every NFL offense likes to run a running back committee. You know what I mean? The Philadelphia Eagles obviously have Saquon Barkley. The Giants used to have Saquon Barkley. So they do it a little bit less, but most offenses like to use a committee. So I think that Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Cam Scatterbo, probably a pretty good duo on paper. At least their deepest significant contributor expected to play is the 4th rounder, Cam Scatterbo out of Arizona State. Commanders class, 2 first-round talents, offensive lineman Josh Connerly Jr. and cornerback Trey Amos. 3 significant contributors that I see right now, Connerly, Amos, and wide receiver Jalen Lane, who's not going to be like number 2 receiver necessarily, but I think between his rotation as a receiver and also his contributions that we hope to see on special teams, I think that's where you'll get the significant contributor tag from him. Deepest significant contributor coming in the 4th round. I will give a little bit of caveat, a little bit of a hot take. 7th round pick running back, Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. Now, I'm not going to go crazy and be like he's going to be the starter or he's even going to get like Austin Eckler sent to the bench, but I could see a reality where he takes the 3rd running back job coming out of training camp, preseason, whatever it is, and basically we see a 3 running back rotation. Obviously, B-Rob, obviously Austin Eckler would get the majority of the work. Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt would get the minority share of that work, but a 3-back rotation, so to speak. And in that case, he could turn into a potential significant contributor down the road. But I'm not going to say that right now and just, skew the score towards the Commanders as Cam was referring to. So I'm Asian. I like numbers. Commanders, Giants, Cowboys, they all get a point in our system here for having the most first-round talents drafted. They tied for the most first-round talent drafted this year. The Cowboys get 2 points for having the most significant contributors projected. Commanders and Giants get 1 for having the second most. The Eagles get none because they're at the bottom. The Cowboys get another point for having the deepest special contributor pool. Everyone else was in the 4th round. No points for that. So that means the Cowboys end up with 4 points. Commanders and Giants tied with 2 points. The Eagles have no points. Again, the Eagles also have the fewest roster holes to fill from their draft class. The Giants and Commanders, I'd say the Giants probably had more, but they, whatever it is. The Commanders have, a little bit less. The Cowboys and the Giants, I would say, probably have the most. So there's my NFC East draft class order for 2025. Again, Cowboys, Commanders, Giants, Eagles. Fortunately, that doesn't necessarily, that's not going to predict or play into significantly the NFC East standings, right? Anything like that. Now, if we want to get into down the road projections, if you believe Jackson Dart is going to be a long-term starter in New York, you probably got to give him some bonus points there, right? Get a quarterback, get him in the 1st round. The Eagles drafted a lot of depth, like a lot of linemen, especially depth players. Linebacker, Jahad Campbell's a depth player, but he could be a starter in 2 or 3 years. So if you want to try to project that, then maybe those grades would change a little bit. So that's kind of the snapshot. But looking at just how as it is in this moment, that's how it boils down. But you know what? I thought, let's also take a look back. Because like I said, you can't really start to judge these draft classes until you have some time to see them. We've had time to see the 2024 class. We've had time to see the 2023 class. That's as far back as I want to go. So we're going to do that. 2024, 2023. Then we're going to get into some more free agent ideas and talk about the kicker swap that happened here earlier this week. All of that coming on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks in part to our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the fun. Right now, when you join FanDuel, place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. The Denver Nuggets and my guy Jamal Murray helped me make about $70 last night by dropping buckets on the Los Angeles Clippers. And right now, if you want to go bet on the Nuggets to win their Western playoff series against the Los Angeles Clippers, you can do so with minus 184 odds. I've also got a same game parlay in on the Rockets and Wizards game or Warriors game that is going on as we record this episode, and it is not looking too good. Thus is gambling. So be safe out there, but have fun for what you're doing. Same game parlays, my favorite way of getting involved in the action. However you want to get involved in the action, do it at FanDuel. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Continuing now with this mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. And great question from Cam here, ranking the draft classes from the NFC East. But I also wanted to take it a couple steps further. I wanted to look back a little bit where you can more accurately grade some of these draft classes. So let's look now at 2024. And when you break it down here, the Commanders drafted 2 first-round talents, quarterback Jaden Daniels, cornerback Mikey Sainristil, 4 significant contributors. Daniels, Sainristil, D-tackle Johnny Newton, who played about 47% of snaps last year. Offensive lineman Brandon Coleman clearly becomes the starting left tackle, significant contributor, right? Also, I almost counted Luke McCaffrey, but I think you got to either be a special teams star or play close to 50% of your unit snaps or a combination of the two. Played about 30%, did well, I think, on special teams, right? But not like I wouldn't put him in a star category. So I left him off of this significant category group, which makes the deepest special or significant contributor coming out of the third round, Brandon Coleman. The Eagles draft class, 2 first-round talents, cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, DB Cooper DeJean, 2 special or significant contributors, both those guys. The deepest significant contributor, second-round pick Cooper DeJean. The Giants, 3 first-round talents last year, wide receiver Malik Neighbors, defensive back Tyler Nubin, who, if you remember, if you're never there and you remember that far, Tyler Nubin was definitely a guy that I had my eye on for the Commanders. Running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. definitely burst onto the scene. 4 significant contributors to the Giants roster last year. Neighbors, Nubin, Tracy, and tight end Theo Johnson, who ended up with about 300 yards receiving for a rookie tight end, 5th-round pick. That's pretty stinking good. 4th-round pick for Johnson, sorry. Deepest significant contributor, 5th-rounder, Tyrone Tracy Jr. Look at the Cowboys, no first-round talents drafted. 3 significant contributors, though. Offensive lineman Tyler Guyton played significant snaps. Offensive lineman Cooper Beebe played like 90% of the snaps. Linebacker Maris Lufau also played over 50% of the snaps there for the Cowboys. The deepest significant contributor coming in the 3rd round, that was Maris Lufau, the linebacker. So Giants get a point for the most first-round talents. Commanders and Giants get 2 points for having the most significant contributors. Cowboys get 1 point for significant contributor. Giants get 2 points for deepest significant contributor. Commanders and Cowboys each get 1 point for the second deepest significant contributor. At the end, the Giants finish with 5 points. Commanders have 2. Cowboys have 2. Eagles end up again with no points. But again, the better your roster up front, the less likely you are to get some of these points for these draft class evaluations. So the Commanders, both years so far under Adam Peters, basically second best class in this numerical metric for what they're doing. Now, roster building, I think AP, if we just went to roster building, things would be a lot different. Getting some guys like Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz to come in here and fill some of these critical areas. If you want to get a bonus point for Jaden Daniels winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, we could do that. You know what I mean? You want to get another bonus point for getting a quarterback. Like there's a lot of ways you could add to this necessarily, but either way, I think you see Commanders near the top of the NFC East in both years. So it's very significant. I mean, Saquon Barkley, right? If he stays in New York, Tyrone Tracy Jr. likely just not a thing, right? So that obviously has something to do with it. Now, the final layer of this, of course, is the 3-year mark, where people typically say you can't really judge a draft class till 3 years down the road. So might be a little scary, but this would be the 3rd year from the 2023 NFL draft class. So where are we today with the 2023 NFL draft class? Well, 1st-round pick, cornerback Emmanuel Forbes, released in 2024. So was 3rd-round pick Ricky Stromberg, 4th-round pick Braden Daniels, 5th-round pick KJ Henry. All of those guys released in 2024. Defensive back Quan Martin started 16 games in 2024, so that's good. Running back Chris Rodriguez, 6th-round draft pick, played in 9 games in 2024. And I know a lot of you want to see more Chris Rodriguez even coming into the season. And 7th-round pick defensive end Andre Jones Jr. played in 2 games in 2024. So some good, some bad, and some not so good from the Washington Commanders 3 years ago. I'm not going to go through and compare the rest of the draft class from the NFC East. We don't need to get into that conversation. But great question from Cam there. Hopefully, look, I'm with you. I don't like ranking the Cowboys at the top of anything either, but That's how the math worked out. 4 questions that kind of combine into one. We got Morris, who came through and said, after the draft, who do you think that they might be adding as one-year options with other veterans that are with the veterans that are still out there? Merle said, what possible free agents would Commanders be interested in post-draft? Doug said, now that we're through the NFL draft, what are the top areas that we need to focus on through free agency? And Hamadou came through and said, the Commanders are being linked to Zadarius Smith and Von Miller post-draft. How likely is a move to happen there? And is there a strong need to make one of those signings happen? So essentially, we're asking a bunch of free agent questions. Hamadou's come through specifically asking about 2 of them, Zadarius Smith and Von Miller. We talked about them specifically yesterday in our Edge free agency conversation. So if you want to go back and check that out for a little bit more detailed information, I will say that as far as Miller and Smith are concerned, it's hard to tell if it's true need or if it's a want, right? Because there's a lot of different things that the Washington Commanders could potentially do. Now, I also like what Jacob Martin, who is on the roster, I think a lot of players have him listed as a D end. I expect him to play outside linebacker. I like what I've seen on tape. I think he's got some Dante Fowler type abilities. And I think that with this scheme, like, look, I'm a big fan of Dante Fowler. Really like him, really like his game. But I'm not in the school of thought that Dante Fowler got all those sacks because he's just that talented. It's more so he fit the scheme that well. So if we can get that same type of fit out of Jacob Martin, which I'm not saying we're going to yet, but if we can, then we could see him have a similar type season for the Washington Commanders. Look, nobody would have predicted Dante Fowler to hit even 10 sacks last year. Jacob Martin pretty much in the same boat. I do like the idea of a combination, though, so like a Von Miller and Jacob Martin, or Zadarius Smith and Jacob Martin. So how likely is it to happen? I think there's a good chance, because right now you look at the roster and Jacob Martin's kind of the only dude you have that really fits that role. At the same time, Dante Fowler Jr. was kind of the only dude you had fit that role last year. Michael Walker a little bit fit that role, right? So there is like 1.5 kind of. So I think you would like to have another guy there. So I think there's a good chance. I don't know how much of a number I could put on it, maybe say 60-40, right? But I don't think it's a slam dunk that it's going to happen either. And of course, there are also the potential trade targets out there. As far as other free agents, we talked about interior offensive line safeties. Interior offensive line, I liked a couple of picks there. Safeties, nothing really moving me on the free agent market when it comes to safeties. I did go through a list of free agents, and I did find a few. Linebacker Jawan Bentley, coming out of the New England Patriots organization, turns 29 in August. He spent 7 years with the Patriots, started 68 games during that time, was a 3-time team captain, injured his pec early in 2024. That cost him the rest of that season. And then according to reports, he failed a physical in March, leading to his release. So health is obviously a big deal here. He says he's healthy. He says he's good to go. But if Jordan McGee were to say get injured again, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, might open a window for a guy like Jawan Bentley to come in, or maybe they bring him in anyway. But I feel like he's probably going out there trying to look for a starting opportunity, and obviously he's not going to come in and bump Bobby Wagner or anything like that out of the way. Linebacker CJ Mosley, kind of that same thread, but he hasn't been the same really since leaving Baltimore. Did have one good year with the New York Jets, but he's been injured a lot, kind of taking a step back. So I think Bentley would probably be the better move. And then linebacker Kazir White is another interesting prospect as a free agent. He's in his late 20s, so not yet 30. Primarily an off-ball linebacker, but he can also come off the edge. Like, he can play the outside linebacker, weak side backer a little bit. So if the Commanders were looking to go to more like 3 linebacker sets this season, then potentially Kazir White could have a solid run with this defense. The Cardinals are reportedly, however, still trying to talk to White and maybe see if they can get him back in their organization as well. So some options out there in those positions for those free agents for the linebackers. I don't know. Looking through the list, guys, like there's some wide receivers, there's some linemen. None of them just really kind of move me, right? Doesn't mean that the Commanders won't go out there and try to make a move. They do have some spots to fill on their 90-man roster if they want to go ahead and do that, but also they could be saving some of those spots for the rookie minicamp, see if anybody flashes. We've actually got another question about rookies, undrafted rookies specifically, that I want to dive into a little bit deeper, kind of like I did with Cam's question. So we'll save that for our next potential mailbag episode coming tomorrow. But to wrap up this one, we are going to talk about some news that came up this week that we haven't been able to cover yet. A swap at the kicker position, what it means and why it happened, as best as we can tell. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. But Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch, it really hit home how much I use DoorDash. I still use DoorDash, but I do it a little bit smarter now because I know how much it really impacts my bottom line. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Wrapping up today's mailbag episode here on Locked On Commanders with a question from Insider Joy, who asked me, how are you feeling about Zane Gonzalez leaving? And I don't know if that's specifically because I'm an Arizona State guy, Zane Gonzalez, Arizona State guy, or if it's just a general authentic question. How do you feel about Zane Gonzalez leaving, right? So on Tuesday, the Washington Commanders signed kicker Matt Gay, and they released kicker Zane Gonzalez. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When the news came across that they signed kicker Matt Gay, I got that from Tom Pelissero from NFL Network, like a lot of you did. Didn't take the time to confirm it. I said, you know what? I can reach out, I can confirm it, but Tom Pelissero is Tom Pelissero. It's Matt Gay, it's kicker. Not going to do that. It's fine. Then I look down on my phone and get a little text message that says, Zane's gone. And I said, woohoo. Let me text back. Yeah, Zane Gonzalez released. That was a little bit weird. That was a little bit of a curveball. So then I went in and said, hey, I need to confirm. Matt Gay's coming in, Zane Gonzalez going out. Like, let's be specific about this. Yes. When I first got word, like I said, I thought competition was coming. Then the release came down. A little bit interesting. Now I'm told, okay, that the team simply likes Matt Gay more than they like Zane Gonzalez. Is that the 100% truth? That is the hard part. And sometimes we don't necessarily always get the 100% truth. But with 90 men allowed on the roster, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't at least let there be a competition before making a move, right? Even if Matt Gay won. But perhaps they released Gonzalez to do him a solid, to go hunt for another better, quote-unquote, opportunity this year. Still seems weird to me, to be honest with you. But so let's try to get down to the bottom of why they might have made this move. Well, of course, there's still time to bring in competition if they decide to do so. As of now, according to my last count, they have 86 players on the roster, including the draft picks. So that includes their most recent draft picks. So they've got 4 spots essentially open. They, of course, could make some other releases and things like that. But essentially, you've got 4 spots open. So they could potentially bring in another kicker. I don't know if Zane Gonzalez doesn't get another job immediately. Maybe he says, hey, can I come back and compete? Maybe they let him come back and compete. But last year, Gonzalez made 71% of his kicks in 2024, field goals in 2024 in the regular season for the Commanders. That sounds really low. It was 5 for 7. He missed 2 of 7. You know what I mean? When you're having such a low amount of field goal tries, the more you miss, like it takes a bigger chunk of your percentage, right? Didn't even have 10. So every miss is more than 10%, obviously, of your made completion percentage. He did make all 19 of his extra points. In the playoffs, he made 7 of 8 field goals, including a game winner in the wild card round against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So when you combine his regular season and his postseason field goals, 86% made field goal rate overall. That's much better. Made all 8 of his extra points in the postseason, so he made 100% of his extra points all year long as he kicked for the Washington Commanders. He does turn 30 in May. Matt Gay, kicker. I'm actually more familiar with Matt Gay than I think people would expect me to, because I covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Matt Gay entered the league as a 5th-round pick. They spent 1 season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, made 77.1% of his field goals that year, 89.6% of his extra points as a rookie. That was enough. The team signed Ryan Suckup in early 2020. They released Matt Gay. He ended up signing with the Colts practice squad in 2020, was signed off the Colts practice squad eventually by the Los Angeles Rams. He kicked 2 game winners in 2020 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 1 in week 11, 1 in the divisional round to send the Buccaneers packing and sending the Rams to the NFC Championship game. Clearly that the bigger of the 2 game winners against the Buccaneers was with the Rams during their Super Bowl win over the Cincinnati Bengals. In that game, he made a 41-yard field goal and 2 extra points to help the Rams win the Super Bowl. Was with the Rams again in 2022 as well. Made 93% or more of his field goals in his 2 full seasons with the Rams. He spent 2 full seasons and then part of the 2020 season, right? 2023, 2024, Matt Gay was back with the Colts. He made 80.5% of his kicks in 2023, 83.8% in 2024, so not as good. Made 96.3 of his extra point tries during his career, 85.5% of his field goals. Very similar to Zane Gonzalez. Zane Gonzalez However, and this is where I think the rubber meets the road, Matt Gay has a much bigger leg. In his career, Zane Gonzalez is 11 of 19, 58% on kicks from 50 or longer. He's only tried 19 of them. Gonzalez has been in the NFL longer than Matt Gay. Matt Gay, with two fewer years in the NFL, is 28 of 45, 62% on kicks of 50 yards or more. I think that's the biggest discriminator here. I think that's the discriminator. We want more leg. Matt Gay turns 31 in March, so it's not an age thing. I think that's really what it boils down to. I think they have similar made field goal percentages. They have similar made extra point percentages. Matt Gay has also made some really big kicks in the postseason. He's made some really big kicks just in personal moments. And he's got a bigger leg. I remember watching him in the indoor practice facility when he was playing for the Buccaneers, just booming kicks, man. It's pretty impressive. I don't know if his leg is still like that, but it's pretty impressive when you see it in person, man. So I think that's really what it boils down to. I think they just like the leg. And what that kind of leans to for me is some of these 4th and 3s, 4th and 4s that they went for when they're at like their own 40 or they're on their own like 35, maybe they weren't 100% like it wasn't like they have confidence, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't just, we're not even thinking about kicking. We have that much confidence. It's also about knowing where your kicker can kick from. And perhaps this season, and this might become a little bit of a surprise to Commanders fans watching the games this year, if I'm correct in this possibility, perhaps especially early in games, 4th and 3 from, the 38, maybe they go for a field goal instead of going for it on 4th down. Maybe, from the 35, 4th and 4 from the 35, instead of going for it, they kick a field goal, right? So that could potentially be kind of what's going on here. Once we get to talk to Dan Quinn, I think we're supposed to talk to him at rookie minicamp. Ideally, you're talking about rookies, but maybe I can get a question in there about Matt Gay and his leg and whether or not that was had an impact on this decision to move on from Zane Gonzalez. So that's going to wrap it up for this mailbag episode. Again, we've got a lot of mailbag questions, a lot of good mailbag questions. And so we're probably going to do another mailbag episode tomorrow. We're going to continue to get through these questions because a lot of good stuff. And obviously, if Commanders fans want to know about it, I want to be talking about it. So come back for our next episode of Locked On Commanders. In the meantime, if you want to get involved in shaping these episodes, all you got to do is text me your questions, text me your topics. And to do that, just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and join the ever-growing population of insiders. Again, I've got one about an hour before this episode went live. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL draft is over, but roster moves are never stopping. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find that here on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this episode today. And as always, I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Everydayers, thank you for coming through every single day. And until we speak again, everybody out there, if you're out and about, please be safe, please be kind, and I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.